Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So now we're on to the section called the entities, which is one of the most important words in this whole thing, actually. So it's a bit dry, but once we get past inshallah, it gets even more interesting. So I'll just make a start. So for students of Ibn al-Arabi who have read about him only in English, the most familiar of terms employed for things in contrast to being is ayn. The expression "ayn thabita" has been translated by scholars in a wide variety of manners, like permanent archetype, most of which obscure the broad significance of the single term "ayn" in Ibn al-Arabi's vocabulary. In the present work, "ayn" in this technical sense is translated as entity. In this meaning, it has no Quranic basis. The Sheikh acknowledges his debt to the Mu'tazilite theologians for the term "ayn thabita," though he also states that they did not reach a full and true understanding of its significance. The Arabic word "ain" has a wide variety of non-technical meanings, some of which, such as "I" or "identical with," are often used in Ibn al-Arabi's writings. In its technical sense, as entity, the term refers to specificity, particularization, and designation. What sets one thing apart from another thing? The ains of the two things. Uh, it's what makes the thing specific and distinguished from one thing as opposed to another. Uh, yeah. In the writings of Ibn al-Arabi's followers, especially the chief expositor of his philosophical teachings, Salahuddin al-Qunawi, this meaning is emphasized by the important role given to the term ta'ayyun, the fifth verbal form from the same root. Just let me get some people inside. Okay. This term signifies to be or to become an entity, or the state of being specified and particularized. Ta'ayyun's grammatical connection with the term entity is well preserved um, by the translation entification. Though Ibn al-Arabi sometimes employs the term ta'ayyun, it assumes no special importance in his works. Um, although he does use it though. Okay, as was indicated in the discussion of relationships in chapter 2, the Sheikh frequently employs the term entities to distinguish existent things from relationships. In this sense, he speaks of the entity of the real, Ain al-Haq, meaning God's being or essence. He also employs the expression among the entities fil to refer to the existent things of the cosmos. This meaning of the term gives rise to the expression entified existence, al-wujud al-aini, which refers to anything that exists in itself, whether God on the one hand or the existent possible things on the other. Existent existence, excuse me, entified existence is contrasted with mental existence, al-wujud al-dhihni, i.e., the existence of a thing as a concept in the mind, whether or not it is found in the cosmos. When the Sheikh uses the term entity of God, he normally means the essence of God. When he speaks of the one entity at Ain al-Wahida, he usually has in view being inasmuch as all existence is but its radiance, and things are its properties and effects. That's a really nice summary for Wahdat al-Wujud, just that last line. Uh, when he talks about the one entity, he means being with a capital B, inasmuch as all existence, right? He's talking about all existence is but God's radiance, and the things are his properties and effects. So that's why you only have one thing, one being, right? So it's wahdat al-wujud. Um, yeah, God says, God makes you grow up from the earth as growing things. The earth is one, but how can the form of grass be compared to that of trees, given the diversity of their kinds, or with the form of man, or with the forms of the animals? Yet all of this derives from an elemental reality, haqiqa or unsuriya. The elementality never disappears through the diversity of what becomes manifest within it. Thus, the diversity of the cosmos in its entirety does not take it away from the fact that it is one entity in existence. In the same way, Zayd is not Amr, but the two are man and insan. So they are identical with man, nothing else. So no matter how many um, human beings you have born on earth, they're all human. That does not change the fact that they're human. From here, you'll recognize who the cosmos is and the form of the actual situation, al-amr, within it, which means like what is the reality of it. If you possess sound consideration, another sahih, like if you possess a sound intellect, you'll recognize what the cosmos actually is. No matter how many different things you see within it, those are just forms for the one entity with a capital O and a capital E. And in your souls, what do you not see? There is nothing but a rational soul, but it is intelligent, reflecting, imagining, remembering, form giving, nutritive, excuse me, nutritive, growth producing, attractive, expulsive, digestive, retentive, hearing, seeing, tasting, smelling, and feeling. Moreover, the soul perceives all these affairs, the diversity of these faculties and the diversity of these names, yet it is nothing extraneous to any of them. On the contrary, it is identical with the form of each. So also will you find the situation in the forms of inanimate things, plants, animals, spheres, and angels. All are identical with the one entity. So glory be to him who made the things manifest, and while he, God, is their entity. My eyes have never gazed on other than his face. My ears have never heard other than his words. Do you have any questions up to here? Okay, then we can move on, inshallah. Entities are, on the other hand, sorry, on the one hand, the possible things as they exist in the cosmos, and on the other hand, the possible things non existent in the cosmos, but existent in God's knowledge. If many translators have rendered Ain as an archetype, this is because God creates the cosmos in accordance with his eternal knowledge of it. Thereby, he gives each thing known by him, each entity immutably fixed, thabit, within his knowledge, existence in the universe. However, the term archetype may suggest that what is being discussed becomes the model for many individuals in the manner of a Platonic idea. In fact, what corresponds to Platonic ideas in Ibn al-Arabi's teachings is the divine names, while the immutable entities are the things themselves before they are given existence in the world. Hmm. There is no difference between the entity known in God's knowledge and the entity in the cosmos, except that in the first case it is non existent, while in the second it is existent. The immutable entity Ain Thabita and the existent entity Ain Mawjuda are the same reality, but one exists in the cosmos and the other does not. The difference between the two corresponds exactly to the difference between the possible thing before it is given existence and the same possible thing after it comes into existence. However, the attribute thabita, immutable, helps remind us that the possible thing never leaves its state of possibility in the divine knowledge. Though the entity may exist in the cosmos, it is still immutably fixed and non existent in God's knowledge. The real's knowledge of himself is identical. See, now he uses the word identical instead of entity because of the word aim. The real's knowledge of himself is identical with his knowledge of the cosmos, since the cosmos never ceases being witnessed by him, even though it is qualified by non existence. But the cosmos is not witnessed by itself in that state, since it does not have existence. This is an ocean in which the considerative thinkers and Nadirun perish, those who have not been given unveiling. God's self never ceases to exist, so his knowledge never ceases to exist. And his knowledge of the cosmos is his knowledge of the cosmos. Sorry, his knowledge of himself is his knowledge of the cosmos. So his knowledge of the cosmos never ceases to exist. Hence, he knows the cosmos in the state of its non existence. He gives it existence according to its form and its knowledge. Yeah, so let's take Mara and then Irvia, yes.
Yeah, so I'm asking this, although probably would have helped to read the sentences a few times, but how can an entity, if I understood correctly, an entity is immutable in the cosmos even though God's knowledge perceives it? witnesses it in the cosmos. So my question is, why is there a difference between God's knowledge in the cosmos and in the world, but here isn't any difference, but is a difference of spatiality of what is found in the cosmos and what is found in the world, although God has knowledge on both.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a fantastic question because really the question points to another question, like what really is a ain thabita or immutable entity, a fixed entity. So the entity is not fixed in the cosmos. Where is it fixed? There's five levels of being, right? You've got the physical world, you've got the spiritual world, the world of meaning. In between the two, you've got the world of imagination, right? That's three worlds. The fourth world is literally the world of God's knowledge. That's like a realm. His knowledge is a realm in itself. And then the fifth realm is perfect man, perfect woman. They bring together all the realms in themselves, right? Um, so in God's knowledge, the thing is fixed in his knowledge. Why is that? Because God knows the reality of a thing. When it comes into existence, it undergoes change and it changes from form to form. So you don't know what a thing's um, fixed reality is until God tells you what its reality is, or until He shows you that reality on the day of judgment. So there's like really easy examples for that. So like Umar bin Khattab, right, the major companion of the Prophet ﷺ, and the second Khalifa, used to be an idol worshiper, but in before he became a Muslim, right? But then in God's fixed knowledge, what is Umar bin Khattab? Is Umar bin Khattab an idolater in God's fixed knowledge? The answer is no, because in God's fixed knowledge, he's actually a saint, the second Caliph of Islam, and a Muslim.
But when we move to the other realm, which you just mentioned, God has complete knowledge of that one as well. So in the example that you gave, uh, he still is not God. The one you just mentioned. I'm sorry, I
Omar,
forgot the
Omar, yeah,
name.
yeah,
Yes.
Omar, yeah.
Um, to use the example from the text, he is still immutable because God had always had knowledge over him.
I mean, he's immutable in God's knowledge, but he's
Yeah,
very he's mutable in this world.
yeah.
He changed in this world.
It's
He just
because
can't
it's through our eyes he
through
becomes
our eyes,
immutable.
through our eyes. Yes, exactly. So through our eyes, he's changing, but
Yeah,
he can't run away from his reality. So it's like no matter what situation God puts him in, eventually he has to become what he really is.
yeah.
Same with everything else in the entire world. We have to become what we are in God's knowledge eventually. So the rose that was that is blooming in this world was always blooming in God's knowledge in all of eternity, right? Because that's how he knows what this rose is. If there's another rose that couldn't bloom, right? Then it won't in his knowledge, then it won't bloom here. Um, like we're very complicated people, right? But in the realm of Ayn Thabita, you're just one thing, your actual final reality. But that's one of the amazing things about this word Ayn, right? Because it means entity, it means I. It also means a spring of water, right? So you can imagine like yourself as a spring of water, and in this water are contained all the forms of your actual reality that are coming out bucket by bucket into existence, one by one, if that metaphor makes sense.
Yes, it does, and you explain it beautifully. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Irvina and then Hannah.
Thank you so much for the discussion. It was very interesting. And then I have two questions now. The first one was about I didn't understand why Chitik doesn't use the word archetype and how he
Okay.
basically uses it and how he defines it basically. And the second one was you said that eventually we will basically become or manifest our Ain al-Thabita or the
Yes.
immutable entity. And
Yes.
I was all this conversation. I was thinking of the rose or a fruit. You know, the apple will become an
Yes.
apple eventually.
Yes.
But then I was thinking about our free will. Can we somehow damage our Ain al-Thabita?
No, because it's fixed. God knows what you actually are. Like Muhammad SAW can't suddenly not be a prophet. Like absolutely not.
Mhm.
Um, and so on and so forth. Like you can't damage it. Like what's happening here is just it's just the unfolding and unraveling of what you are. Um, so yeah, yeah, it's very closely linked to predestination.
I
It's
see.
very closely linked. So that's exactly true, Irvina. But by the way, Ibn Arabi will like shift perspectives every now and then. If you want to go with the perspective of free will, we're going to come across that later on in the book. And that's because you're created upon the divine form. If you want to emphasize free will, you have free will because God has free will. But if you take the other perspective, which is the Ayan Thabita, you don't really have free will. And you are responsible for what you do. You have relative free will, but just not in the ultimate sense, right? Because what God does is he decrees your actions. And he only decrees your actions in accordance with what he knows about you. So when the sinner comes to God on the day of judgment, he says, God, why are you going to punish me? Right? You decreed my actions. What have I got to do with it? So God will respond to the sinner, sure, I did decree your actions, but I decreed your action in accordance with the object of knowledge, which is you, that you gave me. I decreed the action in accordance with my object of knowledge from pre-eternity. Like I didn't make you who you are. This is who you are, right? In the divine view. For you and me, we can't say that because I don't know who you are yet. You don't know who I am yet. So we don't make assumptions right now. But we'll find out when we die. We'll find out on the day of judgment who we actually are,
Uh,
if that makes sense at all. And then the second question about archetype is because archetype is a very Plato thing. So you're thinking more about Plato than you are about Ibn al-Arabi, even though there's like an overlap. There's a lot of overlap between Platonism and Ibn al-Arabi, but archetype is more like the things, um, the best way something can be. That's different to something's ultimate reality. So, like the archetype is about what's called in Platonism the forms with a capital F. So, in Platonism, when God, the demiurge, he's called the demiurge, he's a craftsman. He crafts the cosmos. He does so based on a blueprint. The blueprints are the forms, and the forms show him the archetypes. So, like if you see a tree here, this is a inferior tree to the real true tree in that's known in the demiurge's knowledge, right? Um, if you see like the form of beauty here, so let's say you see beauty here, this beauty is just a shadow of the real transcendent luminous beauty with a capital B that's in the forms, right? So they're called the forms, which are like these transcendental invisible beings, right? So that's archetype, which is not the same as the immutable entity, because the archetype of, let's say, man is somewhere in God's knowledge, right? Like maybe there's like a form for the perfect man, maybe. Whereas when I say what is the immutable entity of Abu Jahl, he's not perfect at all. He's a mushrik. So his immutable entity is that he's a mushrik in God's knowledge. That's his perfection. His perfection is to be what he is in God's knowledge. So that's the distinction.
yeah, very subtle distinction indeed.
Yes. Yeah. And they overlap. That's why it's subtle. Yeah, exactly.
Can I add something more about this? Because I know
Sure.
that we encounter the word archetype even in psychology or in Jungian psychology. So, do you have any knowledge on that and how could we distinguish?
Oh, sure. I I'm not the expert on this. Samir Mahmoud is the expert on this, right?
Yeah,
But
no.
with Carl Jung, we have access in the unconscious, right? We have like this access to the archetypes, and we can embody an archetype, and we can identify with an archetype, um, and that becomes like a spiritual exercise. And so Carl Jung talks about that. He talks about the benefits of the archetypes, but he also talks about the dangers of identifying too much with the archetype. So you can have like a nutball on Earth who's like, I am Jesus, and he believes with his whole heart because he's seen the archetype. Um,
Mhm.
and then he has like mental problems because he identifies too closely with the archetype, and he's not really Jesus, right?
Mm.
This has happened, by the way. Um, God help us. Yeah. So yeah, but that's just a very inadequate summary. There's a lot you can say about Carl Jung's archetypes.
Yeah,
Um,
so much.
yeah, absolutely. Um, Hannah, go ahead, and then we'll carry on.
Okay. There was in the beginning of that section where he says entities are on the one hand the possible things as they exist in
Yeah,
the cosmos, and then on the other hand the possible things non-existent in the cosmos but existent in God's knowledge.
yeah,
And then at the end of that chapter section, it says, though the entity may exist in the cosmos, it is still immutably fixed and non-existent in God's knowledge. So that's like
correct.
in one section he says it's existent in God's knowledge, and then the next at the end he says it's non-existent in God's knowledge. So is that a typo, or is that just some kind of extra level of meaning? Because he's talking about it being non-existent in the rest of the thing section as well. It's difficult to keep everything separate with so much going on in that.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. My note, so there's no typo. My take on that is the things um, God knows about them, so they exist in His knowledge. Okay, so
Yeah.
it's a relative existence, right? But they have no real existence in the cosmos. Like we can speak about them existing in the cosmos relatively, but the reality is that they're non-existent. So in God's knowledge, He knows that they are non-existent. That's their true nature. So when He says that they're non-existent in God's knowledge, it's His knowledge that they don't have true existence. So when He uses existence the first time, they exist in God's knowledge, it just means He knows them, not that they are existent.
Okay, that's clear. That one up. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks for noticing that actually. Yeah, and by the way, like everyone's like really feeling the same thing. This is something that needs to be like read twice to grasp. But I mean, the subtle points aside, the main point is quite clear. I hope. So then, okay, so let's carry on, inshallah. So the real's knowledge of himself is. Or did we read this? Yeah, we did, didn't we? Yeah, we did. Okay, so we're here then. Okay. Ibn al-Arabi takes a middle position between those philosophers who maintain that the cosmos is eternal, qadim, and the theologians who maintain that it is temporally originated, hadith. You could just use the word new. The cosmos is either eternal or it's newly created. As will be seen later on in this chapter, he holds that the cosmos is created from non-existence, but that here non-existence cannot mean absolute nothingness. In the following passage, he affirms the existence of the cosmos and God's knowledge before it enters into creation and points out that the argument over whether the cosmos is eternal or temporally originated is based upon a difference in perspective. So the cosmos is perceived by God in the state of its non existence. So it is non existent in entity perceived by God. He sees it, then brings it into existence through the influence exercised upon it by the divine power. Hence, the effusion of entified existence falls only upon the objects of God's sight in the state of their non-existence. Some thinkers consider the fact that sight is connected to the cosmos in the state of its non-existence, that it is a true sight in which there is no doubt that the object of sight is what is called the cosmos, and that the real is never qualified by first not seeing the cosmos, then seeing it. On the contrary, he never ceases seeing it. So he sees it from eternity, right? That's something that Ibn Sina would say. He holds that the cosmos is eternal. So he who holds that the cosmos is eternal does so from this perspective, you see? Because like the Muslim philosophers are not idiots. Like they know just to say that the cosmos is eternal period doesn't work in Islamic creed and aqidah. It's not acceptable. But they're saying something more subtle. They're saying that like you can't say that at one point in time God never saw the cosmos. So even before it was made, he was seeing it. So that gives it like a relative kind of eternity, right? So then Ibn Arabi carries on. But he who considers the existence of the cosmos in relation to its own entity and the fact that it did not possess the state when the real saw it maintains that the cosmos is newly created or temporally originated. That means like it came about in time. Like, do you guys get the idea? Where it's like he had to have always been seeing it from eternity? Because you can't say that there's a point when he wasn't looking at it. Same with creation. God's attribute of sight is eternal. So he had to have always been seeing it. So all his attributes are eternal. So the attribute of creation is also eternal. So he was always creating the cosmos. So it had to have been there from eternity on some level, right? So Ibn Arabi is saying you can have either perspective if you want. So moving on. None of this implies that anything ever leaves God's knowledge in order to come into the cosmos. What God knows, he knows eternally and immutably. But at a certain point, in keeping with what he knows, he gives preponderance to the existence of the entity over its non-existence, and the entity is then found in the cosmos, without ever coming out of his knowledge. In one passage, Ibn Arabi makes this last point in discussing the difference between the finitude of that which enters into existence and the infinity of that which remains immutable in God's knowledge. The passage makes clear that immutability is a mode of existence which God possessed by the entities over and above any existence that they may have had, they may have in the cosmos. Let me just say that again. The passage makes clear that immutability is a mode of existence with God. Is a mode of existence with God possessed by the entities over and above any existence they may have in the cosmos. So they first exist with God immutably. Ibn al-Arabi is commenting on a hadith Qudsi which reads, O my servants, if the first of you and the last of you and the mankind of you and the jinn of you were to stand in one place then to ask of me, and I were to give to each of you everything he asked, I would not diminish my kingdom by anything, any more than a needle dipped into the sea would diminish the sea. This is because the giver and the receiver of the gift are nothing other than his kingdom, since there is nothing outside of his kingdom. However, in his kingdom, there is that which is described by existence and that which is described by immutability. That which is both immutable and existent must be finite, but the immutable is infinite. That which is infinite cannot be qualified by diminishment, since that of it, which gains actuality and existence, is not diminished from immutability. The reason for this is that the thing in its immutability is identical to the thing in the state of its existence, except that God has clothed it in the robe of existence through himself. So the existence belongs to God, the real, while the thing remains in its immutability, neither diminishing nor increasing. That of it which becomes clothed in the robe of existence undergoes, as it were, entification and specification. Its limits in relation to the infinite are the limits of the needle which you dip into the sea. Look at how much of the sea becomes connected to it. We know that this analogy is correct For we know that there are immutable entities which become qualified by existence, just as we know that some of the sea will become connected to the needle when you dip it in. The relationship of the sea's water to the needle is not the same in degree as the robe of existence put on uh, by the immutable entities. Since the ocean is limited and its existence is measurable and finite, but the immutable entities are infinite. That which is infinite cannot be compared by limits or enumerated, even though the analogy is correct, no doubt. God is independent of the worlds, which means that he has no need for the existence of the cosmos. But without God's bestowal of existence, Ijad, the immutable entities can gain no taste or existential knowledge of their own realities. In the same way, the names have need of the things to manifest their own effects and properties. The fact that God is independent of the worlds means that he is independent of the existence of the cosmos, not of its immutability. For through the state of its immutability, the cosmos provides God sufficiency and independence from its existence, since it fulfills the right of the divinity to have a divine thrall. Through its possibility and need for a preponderator. But the possible things desire to taste the state of existence, just as they tasted the state of non-existence. They ask the necessary being with the tongue of their immutability to bring their entities into existence, so that their knowledge may become tasting. Hence, he brings them into existence for themselves, not for himself. It's a subtle point. It's another subtle point in which he says, look, God doesn't need the cosmos, period, right? Because huwa ghaniyun an alamin. He is free and independent from all the worlds. He does not need them. But he's not independent through their immutability, their fixity, which is to say their realities, right? Because then God, so in Arabic, it's al-ilah, to be a god, al-ilah, the divinity. There can be no divinity unless there's a ma'luh, someone to exercise your divinity over. And he can't be Rahim if there's no marhum, someone to be merciful over. And he can't be a raziq or a razaq, someone who provides nourishment, if there's no marzuq, if there's no one to give nourishment to. So it's a condition of duality, right? So if God wants to be known, he needs the immutability, but he doesn't need the cosmos in order to be alive or in order to exist. It needs to be kept in mind that the existent entities are identical with the effects or properties of the divine names, which is like a really weird way to put it. So it's like when you talk about water, like we think of it as a thing, but it's actually a property of the divine name, the nourisher, for example, or it's a property of the divine name, the life giver. That goes for anything else. Like you could have sun. Sun, we think of the sun as an object that gives light to the solar system, but it's actually just a property of the divine name, the light, and so on and so forth. So the things we see in existence are properties of the divine names and their effects. Hence, the divine names rejoice when the entities enter into existence. Ibn al-Arabi makes this point while discussing the divine marriage, which is one of the three kinds of marriage or sexual union, a nikah, found in the cosmos. It occurs when being comes together with a non-existent possible thing to produce the existent possible thing. That which is desired from marriage may be reproduction, I mean the birth of offspring, or it may simply be enjoyment. The divine marriage is the attentiveness of the real. So tawajjuh means to face, like when he faces something. So the divine marriage is the attentiveness of the real toward the possible thing when he faces it, in the presence of possibility through the desire of love, right? Or through the will of love, so that there may be bliss along with desire. When the real turns his attentiveness toward the possible thing as mentioned. He makes manifest the coming to be of this possible thing, takween. He makes their coming into existence manifest. Now I'm saying it in like a stupidly complicated way because you could just plainly say he makes it exist. But that's actually wrong for pornography. God doesn't make a thing exist. No, he makes manifest their coming to be. If that's confusing, ask me about it later. Hence, that which is born from this coming together is the existence of the possible thing. The entity of the possible thing is named wife. The attentiveness through desire and love is called marriage. And the production of the offspring is called a bestowal of existence upon the entity of that possible thing, or if you prefer, an existence. The wedding feasts are the rejoicing of the most beautiful names, for the marriage results in a bestowal of manifested existence upon the entities of the possible things, in order that the effects of the names may become manifest. This is because the names can have no effect within themselves, nor within the named. Their effect and authority can only become manifest within the entity of the possible thing, because of its poverty and need for what is in the hands of the names. Hence, their authority becomes manifest within the possible thing. That is why we attribute rejoicing, happiness, and wedding feasts to them. That means the divine names. This marriage is constant and continuous in existence. There can be no cessation or divorce in this marital contract. Any questions? It's a lot to take in, right? So what we'll do is, if we can just finish off like this page, like we'll stop at the things, and that's good enough for tonight. But yeah, like if anyone wants to ask a question or just take a 1 minute break, let me know.
I was just thinking of the he makes manifest. I left a comment, and
Yeah,
there's something to this that um, underlines some kind of autonomy. It's he creates, but the creation has some sort of autonomy to be created in front of his eyes.
right, right. Now let me explain why. So what is this autonomy? I mean, it's not really an
Autonomy is
autonomy.
not a good word. I'm trying to find the right word because I
It's
can.
more like they have a role to play. So let me explain what is this role that they play, right? It's like this. It goes back to the Quran, and there are Quranic verses which are very simple. They say when God wants a thing to be, He says to it what? He says to it, "Kun fayakun."
Okay.
He says to it, "Be," and then it comes to be, right? That's the usual translation. But um, in Arabic, the word kun, which is a command, it's a command verb. In grammar, it's recognized as a command. So I can't give a command to something, right, that can't hear, one, hear, and two, obey the command. So this is a weird situation in which God is saying to the non existent thing when it already has like a relative kind of existence prior to being made. So it hears the command and then it obeys the command. So the coming into existence is the non-existent thing hearing the divine command and just obeying it. So I gave this metaphor before. It's like imagine you have an ocean. This is the ocean of non-existence. All God does is says to a thing, He says to it, be, and then the thing has to like swim up until it gets to the surface, water surface of existence, and it just breaks through. That's the meaning of the word yakun. Because the word yakun in Arabic The doer of the verb is the thing. Kun fayakun. And then it brings itself into existence. That's the literal translation.
Because it was in his knowledge all along.
Yeah, it was in his knowledge all along. But the reason he makes manifest the coming to be is because we make ourselves come to be. Like we just hear the command be, and then we swim up to the surface of existence, and we be, and we are, and we become.
We serve his command and knowledge through existence, even while we become manifest into existence. We serve.
We serve, and I mean we obey.
We
Yes,
obey. Yeah, we obey. Yeah,
we obey exactly.
that's a much better word. Yeah.
We obey. So we obey the command, and then we come into existence, and that's our role. That's our part. So
But
that's how existence happens. We just obey a command, and we come into existence ourselves. So that's an
oh my
interesting
God.
perspective that no one's really said other than Ibn Arabi, as far as I'm aware. And he says this is like through unveiling. This is through kashf.
Wouldn't
Uh,
this also some way answer to the question of free will?
yeah. I don't know because I don't know what it's like to be like that before I was made. Because he just told you the possible things desire to become known and to come into existence. So God has mercy on them by giving the command, and then they gladly come into existence. Like it's actually called an existential command. It's not
Yeah.
a law. It's not a legal command. It is an existential command. You can't, and the existential command cannot be disobeyed. Actually, when he says kun, you have to do it. Um, it's kind of like it's just the way reality is, just like the way he makes things here. Like, try to hold your breath. You can't. You have to breathe. So it's as if there's someone commanding us to breathe, and we breathe, but I have to. I don't have a choice because I will die if I
Yeah.
don't. It's not a choice. So when he says be, it's not like, oh, I'm not going to come up. No, there's only one way you would never swim to the surface level, to the surface water of existence, and that's if you are an impossible thing. So you say, oh, I actually belong to the category of impossibles, so I can't come into existence. That's the only way.
Yeah. I'm wondering if the terminology of free will as we know it generally makes it a bit more difficult to tackle when in reality it is not, because I'm thinking whether we talk we would be tempted to talk firsthand about free will as a choice between this or this, but we can
Yeah.
also talk about free will in the same way you just mentioned, which is I have the free will to choose the obvious, which is the existence, which is his knowledge, which is to obey the manifestation. This is also free will. The same way you just said, you cannot not breathe. This is also free will, but
Yeah,
it
blurs the line. It blurs the line because I don't know what to call it. Like, yeah, you could call it free will, but for me, it blurs the line. Like, it's not clear to me. The only thing that's clear to me is that who plays the role of bringing ourselves into existence after the command? It's us. But do I call it free will? I don't know. Like, I mean, me personally, I'm not sure.
I'm thinking whether, yeah, I'm just thinking if it can be called free will, if we would say that it's a choice agreed by all parties involved, so to speak. Again,
Maybe. I don't know. It's a really hard question.
there is no antagonist choice antagonistical choice to it. It's just
They say so like Plato would probably be of this view as well, but they say that like before you were made, the hardships you faced in this life, you chose them in the previous life, or you would have chosen them. Because what you're choosing, it's like the picture that's in front of you is like some huge reward. You're like, oh, I want that station. And then in this world, it manifests as a hardship. because the hardship gets you to that high station. So maybe, I don't know. Sorry, so Tina and then Hannah. But thanks, Mara, for that thought. Subhanallah.
I was having a thought about the relationship to creativity and the role of artists, which was spurred by the lines, then being comes together with a non-existent possible thing to produce the existent possible thing. Is that to be seen as the participation from the artist's side to avail what's coming as inspiration and to in that respect create something that didn't exist before, or is it purely something interior to God's existence? I mean, what's the role of human beings in being co-creators and accepting to try to represent part of his creation?
No, that's an excellent question. When artists do that, and anyone, like even like inventors or engineers, for example, they are taking on the divine name al Badia, which is literally like the innovator, the originator, right? Someone who can bring about something into existence that wasn't previously there. And I totally agree with you that there's this kind of like, if not overlap, there is like a faint reflection. What the artist is doing, there's a faint reflection of that, of the primordial act of creation, for sure. As the artist tries to become receptive to a kind of inspiration that then gives birth to a piece. Yeah, there's definitely like a connection in that way. There is a parallel. I would think there's definitely a parallel for sure.
And one could possibly say by extension that it goes for nearly all of us in the way if we can see life in or to produce things even like by doing things differently and not
Yes.
being in some kind of automatic response all the time. So I mean artists are the ones that produce things that everybody can see, but the creativity of a sort of creatively minded person might not be seen, but might even be being part of that process.
It is. It is. It couldn't be anything else, actually, because you can't go outside of God's reality. So you
Yeah.
just reminded me of something. Thank you so much. Like I'll share with the group.
Thank
So, so like there's another place where the Sheikh Al Akbar talks about the divine act of bringing things into existence, right? So then what's our role as humans? We do the same thing, right? And like when you do it with that intentionality, then you are a quasi divine being that is bringing things into existence, right? And then God has his own reasons for bringing things into existence. And then we have ours as well. So God wants to be known. So he's known in the thing. So that's why he brings them into existence. So he can accomplish his particular will. Um, so each day he's upon a task. Each day in Arabic means each moment. So the smallest indivisible unit of time. Each precise moment, he's creating something, right? And so the saint tries to copy that, right? So in Arabic, he talks about that, about the well-known. You know this, the prostitute story in Islam. The of She belonged to the children of Israel. Uh, she wanted to slake the thirst of a dog, so she went down the well with her sock, got some water for it, um, and then she satiates the dog's thirst, right? And then her past sins are forgiven. So like Muslims are taught that story like from an early age, right? So like almost everyone knows it. But then I use that story to illustrate the example of the divine creation, because she was bringing a divine act into existence herself by doing that, um, which is a really fascinating way to use that story. if that makes sense at all. Hannah, and then we'll carry on.
Yeah, sorry, come.
Thanks for that.
I'll just stick to what they're all very interesting, mashallah. Everybody's mashallah. But I was just thinking about the kun
Yes.
and the shape that the kun makes. And I think and it's like this whole thing of it, bringing the things out of the oceans of non-existence into existence, and like the noon is like a vessel, and the dot is swimming in this vessel, almost like in the ocean. And it's in a way, it's a bit like a ladle, almost like you putting the ladle into the water and bringing out this thing, or the aleph or the pin. Don't know. There was just something about the shape, the way it's formed, that seemed to reflect the meaning of what he's saying there. But do you know anything more about what that could be?
Would you mind just repeating that? So you're talking about the shape of existence, or?
Yeah, astaghfirullah, it's not very clear. I just thought that the kun, the image, the form of the kun, the way the word kun is written,
yes,
seemed to reflect the whole sort of concept of the things being drawn out from the ocean of Allah's knowledge and birthed into existence.
It could very well be. I wouldn't know, but so the shape of the letters is sacred, which means they tell us about many secrets, one of which is the way wujud works. So I wouldn't be surprised at all. But I don't know how the shape of the letter kaf and nun would do that. I have no idea. But yes, like the whole Arabic script, the way it's written, that's also, by the way, that's part of the art of calligraphy. The calligraphy is supposed to illustrate all that. So what is the calligraphic way of writing kun? I'd be interested if someone got that out. Because that would illustrate one of its secrets. But yeah, you're right, Hannah. But how exactly, like the shape, how does the shape show that? I don't know. But someone who is a master of calligraphy could tell you. But like, what an interesting idea, subhanAllah. Okay, so I mean, if everyone's okay to go, like we could finish up to here, or we could just call it a night. Like, how do you feel? And there are secrets to the dot and the new shape. Absolutely, yes, correct. Okay. Okay, I mean, I'm gonna try and rush it if you guys are okay with that. But if anyone wants to stop, tell me now and we'll stop. Okay.
Maybe it's better to stop because yeah.
Okay, that's what I was looking for. Okay. Thanks for repeating that. So we start on page 86, and then we'll continue onwards next week, inshallah. Okay, so let's just stop the recording here then. And yeah, guys.